Hello students, I am Barsha, your teacher for today. I welcome you all to this exciting, interesting online class of today. Today we are going to study another interesting chapter, which is Walls Tell Stories. India is a land of rich cultural heritage, and so there are so many forts and monuments in our country which we are so proud of. But every fort, every monument took so many days to be built up to this structure, and all these walls have such motivating stories behind them. So here is this chapter to make us aware about that rich cultural heritage behind these special monuments and forts. So I do wish that we all will enjoy this joyful ride of knowing about our rich cultural heritage, and we as the citizens of our country should be proud of our rich culture and heritage. Student, it is very important to know about our traditional things, our ancient scriptures and this culture and heritage. So, we will start our chapter Walls Tell Stories. Are you all ready for that? Okay. So, we are going to start our chapter now. So here is the story about a very important monument. Students, in India, you will get to see a lot of forts and monuments. If I am not mistaken, many of you would have visited many places, let it be Agra or Hyderabad. So you would have seen many palaces, forts like Taj Mahal of Agra, Qutub Minar in Delhi, Red Fort in Delhi, Charminar in Hyderabad. All these are very special structures which depict the rich cultural heritage of our country. So today we are going to explore one of the finest cultural heritage of our country, that is the Golconda Fort, through this chapter, through this story, which is in the form of a dialogue conversation. There are few students who have gone to visit the Golconda Fort, and these students are very happy that they have their Didi with them. The Didi basically is studying history and doing some research about the historical monuments and places. So it is of great help for these children because Didi explains all the things to them very nicely. So let us go, let us see what happens when these children reach Golconda. So the chapter starts with reaching Golconda. The students have already reached Golconda. Let us see what happens then. At last we reached Golconda. We were glad that Didi was with us. Didi studies history and we enjoy visiting different places with her. So the students have already reached Golconda and they are very happy. Glad means happy because they have come to a new place to explore and to learn new things about the place, and they are very fortunate and blessed because they have Didi with them. Didi is studying history and she could help them to know more and better. Now it starts with the conversation among them. Shailaja says, "My goodness, this fort is so huge." Sridhar then says, "And see at what a height it is built." Kalyani says, "Just look, have you ever seen such a huge gate?" Shailaja says, "It must be very heavy. I wonder how many people would be needed to open and close this gate." So they had never ever seen such a huge monument. So Shailaja was so much shocked and surprised to see such a big fort. And Sridhar is amazed at the height of the fort. Kalyani could not believe her eyes because she saw such a big gate. Students, basically we also have gates in front of our houses, but they are of normal measurement and normal dimensions, but this gate was very heavy. Shailaja can't even think that how many people would have been engaged to open and close the gate. Can you imagine how heavy would have been the gate? It would have been so heavy. It is just visible with the structure, and the students, the children are discussing how the people would have managed to open and close this gate. Now what happens next? Kalyani says, look at these sharp iron spokes. I wonder why they were made. Students, even you would have observed in front of our gates, at the top of the gates, there are some sharp spokes kind of structures made. So, can you tell me why are they made? Yes, sometimes we make them to protect ourselves, because if anybody, if a thief or any kind of a person who has some wrong intentions would try to jump over the gate, so the gate may not allow him to enter into our premises. So maybe these gates were also made with the same intention to avoid the enemies. Now Shailaja says, look at these thick walls too. Sridhar says, I have never seen such thick walls. Kalyani says, at some places a part of the wall comes out in a round shape. I wonder why. Now Didi says these are called bastions or burj. See, these are even higher than the wall. The outer wall of this fort has 87 bastions. Thick walls, a huge gate, and so many bastions. So many ways to ensure security. Now Shailaja was very much surprised to look at the walls, which were not the normal ordinary walls. They were too thick, and even Sridhar agrees to Shailaja that he had also never seen such thick walls. Kalyani finds out that at some places the part of the wall is not of the normal rectangular shape, but it is in a circular shape. It is round in shape. She cannot understand that why. Then Didi comes to help them out. Didi explains that the walls which are round in shape are burj. So these structures were even higher than the walls. Students, these bastions are made to keep an eye over the enemies. There is also like a hole made on those bastions. If you could see the structure, you could see it very clearly that these bastions were a great help for the people inside, who could be able to know when the enemies were coming to attack them. They could keep an eye on the activities, on the movements of the enemies outside. So that's why they were built higher than the walls, and there was enough space for the people inside to hide and keep themselves in a safe place. So this fort had 87 bastions. This was all there to ensure security, so that the people, those who are inside, were all safe. Now we have come to know about the Golconda Fort. I would like to tell you that Golconda Fort is in Hyderabad, we already know, and this is a very special monument. Okay, there are some questions which we would discuss. So here are the questions for you. You have to think about these questions. So why were bastions made in the fort wall? Okay, so this is your question. Yes, I know you have already got the answer. Yes, you are all correct, students. The answer is, these bastions were made in the fort wall to ensure security of the fort. Okay. Now let us move to the next question. The question for you is, why were big holes made in them? Yes, I just discussed it. Yes, the big holes were made in them to increase the viewing area, so that the people could see the area properly, and soldiers could look through these holes and could keep a better vigilance. They would get a better vigilance on the enemies, those who were trying to attack. Okay. Now let us come to the next question. what difference would be there if you were to look from a straight flat wall or a bastion at a height? How would the soldiers find peeping from the holes in the bastions useful while attacking? So here is the difference, students. It is very clear and evident that bastion ensured better safety of soldiers. It also provided a better vantage point from where a larger area could be seen. If you would see it from a flat wall, your vision would be very limited and restricted, but in the case of bastion it will not happen so. So it would not have been possible from a flat wall, okay. So I do wish that you have got the idea very clear in your minds. Now let us see what happens next. Now we will see what is inside the fort. Now Shailaja says, I wonder how old this fort would be. Do you think the king built the fort so that he could live here? Kalyani says it was written outside that Qutub Shahi Sultans ruled here one after another from 1518 to 1687. So Didi says much before that, in 1200, this fort was made up of mud and different rulers lived here. Shailaja says, oh look, this board has a map of the fort. Sridhar says this map shows so many gardens, fields and factories. See, there are many palaces also inside the fort. Shailaja says that means that not only the Sultan but many other people like farmers and workers must also have been living here. Kalyani says it must have been a complete town. So now when they are exploring the fort inside, they are moving from one place to another inside the fort, they found that it was such a huge place. So they could not guess the age of this fort. So Shailaja asked like how old this fort would be and what do the other friends think about the age of this fort. Okay, so the king would have built it so that he could live inside this fort, or was there some other reason? Kalyani says that just before entering the fort, she had seen that it was written outside that Qutub Shahi Sultans ruled here one after another. So this was a fact, or you can say the information, which is almost given in front of so many ancient forts and buildings, that is just to make people know about the facts which are attached to that particular place. So that was the information that Qutub Shahi Sultans ruled one after another, and that was a period from 1518 to 1687. Now Didi adds on to their information that much before that, in 1200, this fort was made of mud and different rulers lived here. I have already told you that this was made by the Kakatai rulers in 1143. Shailaja also finds a map of the fort. Students, a map of the fort is a guide for the people, those who live there. It helps you to locate places because everyone is not acquainted with each and every place inside the fort. So sometimes it is necessary to get the information about the different places located in the fort through a map. So Shailaja got the map, and Sridhar gets in the map that there are so many gardens, fields and factories. So even inside the fort there were many palaces to be seen. Now Shailaja feels that means that it was not meant for only the Sultan. This fort was not only meant for the ruler to stay, but there were other people also who were staying, maybe for helping the Sultan or the ruler or for some other purpose. So she feels that there would have been people like farmers and workers also. And Kalyani adds to that, that means it would have been a complete town, just as a town had all the people with you. So there are so many different people around you staying and so many houses are there. So similarly this fort was also just like a complete town. Now let us find out what happens next. So here is the Sultan's palace. Now they go to the Sultan's palace. Now Sridhar finds these steps seem to go on and on. Shailaja, even in those days they used to have buildings with 2 floors. Now Sridhar is climbing up the stairs and he finds there are so many stairs and it is not coming to an end. The stairs are just continuing, going on and on and on. And Shailaja was so surprised to find that at those ancient time also they had 2 floored building. So there were 2 floors, okay, just now as we have our apartments, so there are 4-storied building, 6-storied building and even higher than that. So in that time also they could see the 2-floored building. Now Kalyani says, now the building is in ruins, but one can imagine that earlier there were many big halls and rooms here. Sridhar says, look at this beautiful carving on the walls. It is so fine. Kalyani says, we also saw something like a fountain on one of the roofs. Didi says, yes, there were many big tanks and fountains here. They used to be full of water. Now, can you imagine, students, that such a huge and ancient building was no more perfect and intact now? That is what Kalyani is pointing out, that now the building is in ruins. That means the building had been destroyed to some extent. It was devastated. It was not in a perfect condition. But from this condition also it could be figured out that this was such a big building with so many halls and so many rooms. And Sridhar was amazed to see the beautiful carvings on the walls. You know, you will find these carvings on these kinds of forts and monuments walls only. So that architecture was of such a superb quality. It was so fine. What about those special people, those who would have been engaged in this kind of carvings? So we should be happy to see these kinds of designs, these kinds of carvings. We have such a rich architecture also. Kalyani got to see a fountain on the roof also. Can you imagine how nicely this structure had been made, and what a plan. There were carvings on the walls, there were fountains on the roofs. Could you imagine how the water would have reached to the roof and how the fountain would have been working? So Didi makes it very clear that there were many big tanks and fountains. So maybe the water would have been collected from the tanks or big reservoirs and would have been used to work with the fountains. And those tanks and fountains were all full of water. So there is some good information about the engineering and architecture style. It says, think even today when engineers design houses, sometimes there is dampness in the walls. And here, so long ago, there were fountains on the terrace. The building must have been made with such good understanding. If we think how the people lived 500 years ago, so many questions come to our mind. For example, how was water lifted to such heights? Can you guess how? Now this is something for us to think and explore. It is so aptly said that now also when the engineers design our houses, sometimes there are some lacunas, there are some faults, the walls become damp. You would see that whenever it rains or whenever there's a heavy rainfall, we could see the walls damped. So the water sucks and it is visible on the walls. But how interesting it is to know that there were fountains on the terrace at that time. So how amazingly these structures were designed, and the people there who lived 500 years ago, how the technology would have been used then. It has been developed now, no doubt, but what about the technology then? It is really very much intriguing to know that how water could have been lifted to such great heights, because the fountains were at the top of the roof. So here is the question for you to think. How would the fountains have worked? Can you guess something? Yes, The fountains would have got the water supply from a large reservoir. As Didi had already mentioned that the water was stored in tanks and reservoirs. So maybe the water would have been carried, the supply would have been taken from the large reservoir. Okay. Now let us come to the next question. What arrangements would have been made in the building for air and light? So students, we all know that it is very important for a house to be well ventilated. So what do you think would have been done at that time for fresh air and light? So yes, you all are absolutely correct. There were large windows, doors and ventilators which allowed natural sunlight to enter the building. These also allowed a lot of fresh air to come in. Now students, you have a picture. Okay, so the next question is based on this picture. You could see the beautiful carving on the wall through this picture, isn't it? And you have to think about the tools which could have been used for such fine carving. Have you heard about any such tools? Yes, let me tell you that these carvings would have been made using chisel and hammer which were made of iron. So these tools help for fine carvings. So at that time the workers would have used chisel and hammers which would have been made of iron. So that has helped to make such a fine carving on the wall. Now let us find out something about direction. Okay. So do you know how to find the direction? So what is the basic technique to find out the directions? So we know there are 4 directions: east, west, north, south. So here is some more information about finding out the directions. So at the place you are, where does the sun rise? At the place you are, where does the sun rise? Where does it set? Where you are standing, find out what all is there to your east and what all is there to your west. Also find out what places are to your north and south. So you have to find out these informations wherever you are standing so that you are very clear about your directions. So it will help you to find out the directions. Now there is something for you to know. Kalyani got a map there and they were discussing about how it would have been helpful to all the people staying inside. So you have also got a map here, that is the map of the Golconda Fort. Okay. Now there are some questions related to the map. Let us see how good you are at the map work and how easily you locate the places in the map. Now this is the first question for you. If you are peeping inside from Bodhli Darwaza, in which direction from you is Katora House? You can see the points, the locations very easily in the map, students. You have to trace it out and you will find out that the answer to this is the north direction. Now let us move to the next question. Okay, this is the question for you. If someone is entering from Banjara Darwaza, in which direction from her is Katora House? Now Katora House is in the south direction. It is in the southern direction. Okay, did you get it? Yes, of course. So that is in the southern direction. Now let us move to the next question. In which direction will you walk from Balahisar to reach Moti Mahal? So in which direction would you walk from Balahisar to reach Moti Mahal? So you have to move in the east direction and then only you will reach the Moti Mahal. Okay. Now let us come to the next question. How many gates can you see on the outer walls of the fort? How many gates can you see on the outer walls of the fort? Students, it is all clearly visible through the map that there are 9 gates on the outer walls of the fort. Okay. Now let us come to the next question. Count how many palaces are there in the fort. How many palaces are there in the fort? And yes, you are absolutely right, students. There are 3 palaces in the fort. Okay. Now the next question is, what arrangements for water can you see inside the fort? For example, wells, tanks, step wells. Okay, there were 5 bowlies and 3 hawse for water. So this was all made for the arrangement of the water inside the fort. Okay, now there are some other interesting questions as well, that on the map the distance between Bala Hisar and Fateh Darwaza is dash centimeter. Did you get it? Yes, it is 8 centimeter. On the map, the distance between Bala Hisar and Fateh Darwaza is 8 centimeter. And on the ground, the distance between the two would be dash meters. So if it is 8 centimeter in the map, so it would be how many meters in the ground? What would be the distance in the ground between the two in meters? So that would be 880 meters. That would be 880 meters. Okay. This is another question for you. How far is Makai Darwaza from Fateh Darwaza? How far is Makai Darwaza from Fateh Darwaza? And it is about 100 meters, students. It is about 100 meters. Okay. So students, we have already learned so many interesting facts about the Golconda Fort. I do believe that you have equipped yourselves with innumerable facts about this fort, and you will always remember that it is very important to know about these special facts hidden in the pages of history. So, there are still many things to know, but it's not going to happen today. You have to be patient and we will learn about it in our next session. Okay? So, till then, keep smiling, keep exploring and stay safe. Thank you.